And this is the spooky, ooky, kooky, and creepy special edition.
Hello, my name is EK and welcome back to my channel Explain. Today, as it's in the run up to Halloween, I'm going to talk about some spooky films that I really like. And I'm going to do my makeup at the same time. And I wanted to like proper autumn smokiness. So we will see how that goes. I absolutely love horror films. I watch them at least a couple of times a week. And I have watched pretty much all of the horror films on Netflix that I would be interested in. So I'm not super into really gory like Saw franchise types. I did manage the remake of Cabin Fever, which was I think directed and written by Eli Roth, and that was like my limit of a kind of disgusting gory horror. But yeah, so I'm going to talk about my 5 favourite horror films that I tend to recommend to people, and then the 5 horror films that either I don't recommend because they're bad, obviously, or that they like severely disappointed me based on my expectations. One thing I did want to mention before I start is the website or like database called doesthedogdie.com, and basically it kind of does what it says on the tin. It tells you if the dog dies in whatever film you're watching, but it also has a really long list of things that people might find upsetting and not really want to watch. So stuff like broken bones, is there anything to do with teeth, are there clowns, are there, you know, does a kid get injured, etc, etc. And it's kind of like crowdsourced, so people having watched the films write whether or not it happened in that film. It's pretty exhaustive as well, considering like there have been some very obscure films that I have watched and they still have the information on that website. So I would definitely recommend it before you watch any of my recommendations, because obviously, especially with horror, there can be so many different things that is designed to kind of upset you and make you uncomfortable, but everybody kind of has their limits and what they do and don't want to watch. Right, I think these eyebrows look okay. I have done makeup recently, but every time I've done it, it has been where I'm going somewhere where I'm going to wear a mask. So I haven't done anything from like here down to no lipstick, no highlighter, no blusher. So I'm kind of excited to get to put like the whole face on today. Where shall we start? So we're going to start with the good ones. The first horror film, it's like a horror comedy, but it's definitely Halloween appropriate. So I would recommend maybe watching it this weekend, and that is the 2014 film What We Do in the Shadows. It's a New Zealand, technically it's not really a horror, you might call it like a gothic comedy or something. It's about vampires and there's werewolves and stuff as well, but it is funny. Like, it is primarily designed to be funny, and it is absolutely hilarious. It's quite wholesome at times as well. So it stars Taika Waititi, who obviously did like Thor Ragnarok and lots of other stuff, and I think Jermaine Clement, who is in it, also like wrote or produced it. So if you like stuff like Flight of the Conchords or, okay, I can't think of anything else, but if you liked that, it's probably going to be something that would interest you. Yeah, so I watch it a couple of times a year. It also has a TV series recently, or season 2 came out recently, based off of it, that I also really enjoy. I thought I might do a video at some point about like horror TV, so I won't talk too much about that, but I do recommend it. And I don't know where the film is at the moment. I'm not sure where any of these things are found at the moment, because obviously it does change, but the TV show of What We Do in the Shadows is available on BBC iPlayer. I've got the Jackie Aina palette, the ABH one. I was going to use the Subculture palette, but I feel like the shades I wanted from the Subculture palette I can kind of dupe reasonably easily with the Jackie Aina palette, which I got more recently, so I'm a bit more excited about it. And I don't know, the colour payoff seems like slightly different, so that's what I'm going to do. I might do like try and do like a halo smoky eye thing. We will see. The next horror film I recommend is also from New Zealand, and that is the 2014 film Housebound. And this is another comedy, but it does definitely have more horror elements than What We Do in the Shadows. The plot is about a kind of young woman who gets busted for trying to rob a bank, and they sentence her to house arrest with her parents. She's like staying at her family home, and she has like an ankle tag. And it basically, the film is about what happens in that house, and it's like a haunted house in terms of genre, but there is a lot of comedy elements to it, and it's got it has a nice wholesome ending, which I feel like in all horrors, the ending is completely what makes or breaks it. Like, I have watched some films where they have been absolutely excellent and the ending is just mediocre or predictable, a bit silly, and it just completely ruins the whole thing. The next one is just pure horror, and this is the film that actually got me interested in horror to start with, and this is the 2013 film The Conjuring. It's kind of, you know, the Conjuring universe. There's been lots and lots of different films kind of sparked off from it, and it is a really good film, so I completely understand why it has kind of sparked off all these sequels and different films covering different parts of like the universe in which the films kind of are set. But The Conjuring, like, it scared the shit out of me. Admittedly, I am the worst for jump scares. Like, they will get me every single time. If I'm in a cinema, it can be the worst film ever, but as long as it's got a couple of jump scares, I will come out of it being like, that was terrifying, I was so scared. And then if I watched it at home, like, I probably wouldn't jump once. But yes, it is kind of it's not jump scare heavy, but a lot of the really, really scary bits are jump scares. But it's just a really good film. Like, you get really invested in the story and the characters, both like the couple who are playing the Warrens, who are like psychics, like paranormal investigators. It's always going to have a little place in my heart because it was the film that kind of got me into horror, and then I watched some of kind of the classics, The Omen, The Exorcist, etc. And I feel like The Conjuring is kind of a classic, or will be kind of a classic of this era. This kind of high budget special effects, but then also quite a solid plot. I think that's going to be kind of something that sets the tone for this era of horror. Let me just catch up with my other fucking eye. I'll be here for 10 years. Okay, so I've kind of caught up with putting that shade on my other eye, and then I'm going to go into the kind of these darker purples, etc. The next one on my list is one that I've always seen mentioned in like those BuzzFeed articles of like scariest moment in a film, like the scariest film you've ever seen. And this is, in my experience, I found it terrifying. And that is the 2005 film, The Descent. It was quite talked about a lot because it's an almost entirely female cast. Oh, I think it is an entirely female cast. The second one has some other characters in it, and it has some men in it, but I think the first one is just women. And it's basically about these women who go, I think is it spelunking? Subcapelunking? Like cave exploration, that's the one. And like, I have read so many Wikipedia pages about like people who died in caves, like the fucking Chilean miners. Obviously they weren't like exploring a cave, but you know. So I would never do this, like 100%. You could not pay me enough money to ever like even look at a cave, let alone go in it. If I had been born like in the Neanderthal period or whatever, I would have just died of fear of going into caves. But anyway, they go into this cave and it's like a hen party, which is also like, I cannot imagine like a worse way to spend your hen party or hen weekend or whatever than like hiking around a cave. But anyway, so they're gonna go in this cave and like do some little wandering, and they got all their equipment and stuff. But the one who is in charge of like planning the cave exploration, she lies and tells them like, oh yeah, here's the cave we're going to. It's, you know, it's been explored loads and people know where we're going. It's really safe. But she takes them to a different cave, which is like mostly unexplored. And I think it was like she wanted to, because a couple of them have fallen out, and she's like, oh, it would make us bond or something. There is like justification for it within the movie, I just can't remember what. But basically then when they get into trouble, it's a case of, well, nobody knows that we are here. The ending, I won't tell you the ending. I knew the ending going in. I knew exactly what happened for most of it, to be honest, and I was still absolutely terrified. And like the ending, even though I knew exactly what was happening, it completely like got me. And I had kind of the same reaction to it as if I had, you know, never heard anything about it. So I highly recommend it. The sequel to it, that I think it's just called The Descent 2, is not as good, but it's still pretty good. Like, if it was a film on its own, you would be like, oh yeah, that was a pretty good film, rather than it just kind of like latching onto the success of the first one. I mean, I could have just gone straight in with the purple, but I wanted it to kind of have a slightly more like blown out look, and I don't really know how well I've done that, but you know, I tried.
I tried, and therefore no one should criticize me.
The next film on my list is actually the newest one, like, of this list, and that is 10 Cloverfield Lane, which came out in 2016. So there was, I think it was just called Cloverfield. There was a film called Cloverfield, and it was like a found footage horror where I think it was like the apocalypse happened, like all these aliens came down and like the world was ending, blah blah blah. And I don't think I watched that, but I like remember it coming out, etc. And 10 Cloverfield Lane is set in the same like world, in the same universe, and at the same time as Cloverfield. And basically it's about this woman who's played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, I think her name is, and she gets into a car accident, and when she wakes up, like she becomes unconscious from the car accident, and when she wakes up she is in this house, and the house is owned by John Goodman, like a character played by John Goodman. John Goodman does not exist as like a real person within this universe. But basically John Goodman's character is like, yeah, the world has ended, like all this stuff has happened, and you know, we need to stay. He's like built a bunker, and that's where they are, and he's like, yeah, this is where we need to stay because it's not safe. And like the rest of the film is kind of basically Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character and the audience somewhat trying to find out if that's real, like has there been an apocalypse, etc. Is it actually dangerous to go outside, or is John Goodman lying and has like kidnapped Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character? The best part about the film, when I watched it with Lauren, who is very much into horrors, and whenever we hang out we always end up watching horrors. But yeah, we called her, I think it was MacGyver, because every time something happened, she would like do this Blue Peter sticky back plastic, his one I made earlier, like jewelry rig of whatever it is she needed. She was just so resourceful, and I think it's quite nice when you see a protagonist in a film, in a horror film specifically, that you're kind of going like, yeah, that's actually a good idea. Like, you're so used to saying, you know, don't go into the basement alone, don't leave, you know, the zombie unattended, you know, don't read the Latin, etc.
I'm drawing a line in the fucking sand here. Do not read the Latin.
So it's kind of nice to be like, oh no, that's actually a really good idea. That's, you know, what a survivalist or whatever would recommend doing in these scenarios. So those are my top 5 good horror films that I always recommend to people, and I would say are kind of out there in my favourite horror films that I have watched. Alright, so we've had the best ones now, and now it is time for the worst ones. So as I said, these aren't necessarily like the worst horror films I've ever seen. One of them is, well, 2 of them is, but 3 of them are just ones that I found really disappointing and like didn't live up to the hype, or other people loved them and I just really didn't see like what all the excitement was about. I watch a lot of very bad horror films on purpose kind of thing, so lots of like very cheap found footage ones, and you know, ones with terrible acting, etc. So I'm always like willing to embrace one that is, you know, a little bit more amateur. Alright, I hope it didn't cut off too kind of abruptly, but my camera died, so I had to perform CPR. What was I talking about? So it did slightly cut off. What I had started to talk about was the horror film from 2014, which is called It Follows, and that was like the first on my list of terrible horror films. So this is your brief interlude before we get back to the action. Bad films, yeah, It Follows from 2014. Yeah, I'm sure it had like a lot of deep and meaningful stuff in terms of like, you know, attitudes to like promiscuity, etc, etc. But like nothing really happened, and there was never any kind of established logic of how, like, you know, the haunting took place. And yeah, it was just kind of like they had this one premise of if you have sex you will die, basically. But they didn't really like go anywhere with it. But it is very like beautifully and artistically shot. Like the cinematography is very impressive, which I think definitely was partly responsible for some of the hype that perhaps would not have been like such glowing praise had it been on a slightly kind of lower quality budget. The next one is part of the Conjuring franchise, and I was really excited for it when I saw like the trailer and saw that it was going to come out, and the film was just so like mediocre, and that is The Nun, and that came out in 2018. It is kind of a spin-off of The Conjuring. It's part of that little franchise, and the main actress in it is the sister of the woman who plays Elizabeth Warren, or whatever her name is. It's the farmer girl Farmiga, I'm not sure, sisters. So the one in The Conjuring is quite a bit older than her sister, so she's like kind of my age, I think, the younger sister. But yeah, so she plays a nun, and it's like in the 50s, and they go to this like convent in I think it's like Bulgaria, maybe. There's a French guy in it, but I can't remember where like all the other characters are from that aren't American. And basically it's like, oh, the Catholic Church is worried about this supposed like possession demon shit. You need to go and like sort it out. So the young woman kind of goes off with this like exorcism expert from the Catholic Church, and they have like, you know, terrible adventures. But it was like the story was really, really shit. The effects were cool, it was very beautifully shot, the acting was pretty good, but like the script was just so mediocre, and it's kind of like, I couldn't really tell you the plot, even though, you know, I was paying pretty good attention. But yeah, because it was kind of really not much happened, and I don't really know if it followed its own logic in terms of how the like demon or possession or whatever was meant to work. And like the twist was really shit as well. I love watching crap horror films, so it's not so much that I don't recommend these films, they're just films that stick out to me in like the grand scheme of being very mediocre. The next one is a bit of a funny one because parts of it I did really enjoy, and up to about like just over halfway through the film I probably would have said like, oh yeah, this is a good film, and then it just was a disaster. And it is called What Keeps You Alive. It came out in 2018, and I don't know if it still is, but it was on Netflix. Under the genres, it was advertised as like horror, and then also under LGBT. So I was like, oh okay, little queer horror films, this could be interesting. And I did read that apparently the script was written for a like mixed sex couple, like a man and a woman, but they changed it and, you know, just happened to kind of make it a lesbian couple. Some of the film was okay. There was kind of a little bit of a twist, like what you expected the trajectory of the film to be. Quite early on, the rug gets pulled out from beneath your feet, and then, like, without giving too many spoilers, the character escapes from, you know, like the danger that she is in, and for pretty much no reason, she ends up going back to, like, I don't know, like get revenge maybe on the person. Like, it just made no sense. You know, she was clear of danger. She could have gone and lived her best life and never worried about it again, except obviously like in therapy, because that would be so traumatic. But anyway, she just went back, and it was like, there's no one who would ever look in that situation and be like, this is a good idea, I need to go back to where the danger is. So even though, again, very beautifully shot, great, the acting was pretty good, but when it kind of pushes over that bit of like what is plausible, when it stretches the limits of your imagination essentially, and instead of like suspending disbelief, it just kind of goes, it jumps the shark really. And I think with horror, when they are in these horrible scenarios, you need to kind of be watching it and understanding or sympathizing with the actions and the decisions that the main character does. So, you know, if they do something silly, like they do go down to the basement, and you're kind of going, oh my god, don't do that, but in the circumstances of the film, you understand that there is a reason that they have decided to do that. And I feel like with this film, there was no good enough reason for her to, you know, take herself back to the danger. Okay, the next one is just straight up garbage, worst film, and it's from 2012, and it has stuck in my mind ever since, and it is called ATM, and it has, I think her name's like Alice Eve. She was in one of the Star Trek films. Then it has a blonde actor, I have no idea, they have been in other stuff but I can't remember the name, and then it has either Drake or Josh from Drake and Josh, I can't remember which one it was. And basically it's like they are at a Christmas party, like a works Christmas party, and they all end up kind of going like sharing a lift home, and they want to get pizza, so one of them is like, oh, we have to like stop at an ATM so I can get cash. And I mean, I don't know if there are ATMs in the UK like this or in any other parts of the world, but apparently where they were in America, the ATMs were like in almost like a big bus shelter type thing. It was like a little vestibule that you like go in, rather than the ATM literally just being outside on a wall. And then they get like stuck in there, and this like serial killer whatever is like trying to kill them through the power of keeping them in this ATM. And it's a bad film. There is a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense and that is completely like unbelievable and ridiculous, but the ending is just the worst. I won't tell you the ending because of spoilers, but I recommend looking it up if you're thinking, well, I can't bother to watch that film, so now I'm never going to know the ending. Yeah, just look it up on Wikipedia, because it is possibly the most lackluster, disappointing, mediocre, underwhelming, ridiculous endings that I have ever had the misfortune to lay my eyes upon. So the final terrible film is, it's from 2019 and it's a sequel to a film that I didn't watch, but I remember the advertising campaign, and the original film I think was just called The Gallows. And if you remember, in like 2015, which is when it came out, there was this whole advertising campaign around, it was called like Charlie, and it was supposed to be this kind of like make your own DIY Ouija board, where basically you ask Charlie like to say yes or no, and you spin, you like span a pencil or something. And anyway, so that I don't know if the film was like particularly successful, but I remember it coming out, and this was a sequel to it, and it was very much that direct to DVD bargain bucket sequel. It starred, I can't remember the actor's name, but he plays Kyle in Neighbours, which was weird enough as it is. The main actress in it, I mean, she wasn't the worst, but the character was. Like, the character was absolutely appalling, and the writing completely sucked. So whether her acting was really, well, okay, yes, her acting was quite bad, but even if it had been amazing, that would not have saved this film. The ending also was atrocious. The ending was supposed to be a twist, but honestly, like, it just made you laugh because it was that crap. It almost is one of these things where I'm like, please watch this because it is terrible. I think it was on Prime when I watched it. Yeah, but it's just absolutely appalling. Probably one of the worst horror films that I have ever seen. But yeah, definitely one where it's like, it's so bad. Well, it's not good, but it's so bad that maybe you should take this opportunity to witness such an abomination. It's like the horror equivalent of is it The Room? The one that was like a really terrible film that became kind of a cult classic and became like this whole meme. This is the horror version of that. I haven't actually done foundation for several months now, so I don't really want to do it on camera. So I'm going to go and finish the rest of my makeup off, and then we can finish up this video. Okay, I went for like the real spooky, ooky, creepy and kooky vibes with this MAC lipstick in the shade Diva. It's quite matte, but it's also one of like the darkest ones I have, whereas a lot of my other kind of like blood red purples are slightly pinker, whereas this is like that really dark, like proper oxblood red that kind of matches my nails. And I think you can see the purple reasonably well on my eyes. On the camera, the orange is like a lot more orange than it is in real life, and it's kind of a lot brighter than in real life, but I'm very, very happy with how it turned out. And I will put all of the information about each and every product I used in the description obvs. So those are my top 5 and bottom 5 horror films pretty much ever, I guess. They're the ones that really, really stuck out. I do need to kind of go through a list of every horror film ever and work out which ones I have watched, because I have watched a pretty astonishing amount, and that will continue. So if you have any horror recommendations for me, please put them in the description. Obviously this is like a little bit different from my history content. I have got some history videos in the pipeline that I want to do, but yeah, I mean, the whole point of this channel is for me to do whatever the fuck I want. And I feel I have done this today. So thank you. Please feel free to subscribe, like this video, put a comment down below, etc, etc. And I hope that you have an amazing day.